What is up, YouTube? It's your favorite transparent YouTuber, Transparent Hoodie, back at you with another video. Today we're going to be talking about some Legacy of the Duelist deck profiling. I've been working on this Blackwing deck for pretty much the inception of this game. Blackwings is my favorite deck, and I'm happy to share it with you guys today. So pretty much I'm just going to be going over the type of deck this is, the game plans that you want to kind of look out for when you're using this deck. Also, if there's anything that you guys want to change or modify, that's completely up to your discretion, because the side deck is an actual, like, authentic side deck. Like, I run this side deck if I'm doing, like, player matches and we're doing matches. Okay, so for the most part, this is the deck profile. You want to run 2 Allure Darkness, 3 Black Whirlwinds, 1 Brilliant Fusion, 3 Hand of Destructions, 1 Instant Fusion, 1 Mass Change, 1 Shaddoll Fusion, 1 Soul Charge, 1 Solemn Strike, 1 Solemn Warning. You also want to run 1 Storming Mirror Force, 1 Gem Knight Garnet. You want to run 2 Blizzards, the Far North. You want to run 3 Boar the Spear. You want to run 3 Gale the Whirlwind, 1 Gladius, 2 Harmonton the Dust, 2 Kalut the Moonshadow, 2 Chris the Crack of Dawn. No, oh, my fault. 3 Chris of the Crack of Dawn, 1 Orochi, 2 Paniki the Waxing Moon, 1 Steam the Cloak, 1 Zephyros the Elite. You want to run 1 Ghost Ogre, 1 Trick Clown, and then 2 Shaddoll Dragons. So all in all, you should have 42 cards. If you guys want to know where to get any particular card, I will leave everything in the description down below, or just comment, let me know what card that you're particularly looking for or you don't have, and then I'll just let you know and respond to your comment. So that goes for the main deck. So for the extra deck, you want to run 2 Windows. You want to run 2 Windows. You want to run 1 Norden. You want to run 1 Seraph Knight, 1 Dark Law, 1 Chidori, 1 Raikiri, 1 Beals, 1 Northing, 1 Hawk Joe, 1 Crystal Wing, 1 Ice Beast, 1 101. You also want to run 1 number 11 Big Eye, and you want to run 1 Force Strikes. So all in all, that should be 15 cards right there in your extra deck. So the side deck is optional. You don't have to necessarily run anything I have in my side deck, but just in case, like, not every duel you're going to have is going to be a 1-for-1 situation, so you never know what card you're going to need for those situations. And for the most part, Anti-Spell Fragrance, I put 2 in there. Dimensional Prison is kind of hit miss. I put 1. Icarus Attack, only because it's Blackwings, I have 2 in the extra deck just in case if I need that extra level of popping. Vanities of Emptiness, just in case if you want to stun your opponent when you're trying to have, like, your big plays go through and it's your opponent's turn, you just want to stun them. Blackluster Soldier, because it's kind of easy in this deck with cards like Trick Clown and Ghost Ogre, you can throw it out. Effect Veiler, you also have Effect Veiler too. Trishula, only because it's kind of easy to get out Trishula in this deck, is not that hard. Also Abyss Dweller, Castell, Cowboy, Draco Sack, and then F-Zero. You can get out F-Zero pretty easily in this deck too, only because of all the level 4s that you have. You can pretty much get out Ice Beast, so you can get out like Force Strike, and then you can go for like a F-Zero. Plus you can't do battle damage to the cards for the most part, so you have that. Alright, so let's get to the breakdown and the explanation of how I go about using the deck. So for the most part, depending on what you get your first turn, which is pretty much anything, right? Like, your first turn is always your most important turn, and you don't want to, like, overuse any of the resources that you have. So for the most part, whenever I duel with this deck, and I'll show video clips and everything of just how, or duel samples that I have in the past that I use this deck for, and kind of what I go for. But for the most part, let's say, for example, you open up with like a Mass Change, and pretty much the majority of the deck is Dark Monsters. So if you open up with Mass Change and you go turn 1 or turn 2, you definitely want to go into Dark Law. You always want to go into Dark Law first, only because if you're going first in the duel, you get Dark Law, you pretty much have your opponent put in this situation where they have no choice but to kind of like aggressively attack Dark Law, because without them destroying Dark Law, they won't be able to start off a lot of their plays. So that's the only reason I like going turn 1 Dark Law. But that's the thing about this deck sometimes as well. You don't always get Dark Law. So when there's situations where I'm not able or don't have the actual cards to get out Dark Law, I would either go for 2 other turn 1 plays. So turn 1, regardless if I go first or second, but my first turn, I would either try to go for Force Strike and then try to go for Beals. Those are the only 2 cards I would go for. I would go for nothing else. The only reason I say that, though, is when it comes to this deck, the deck, it's very hard to recover from a board wipe. It's very hard to recover from a negation. It's very hard to recover from a snatch steal type of ability or effect that is being played. So for the most part, those are the options that I always go turn 1. And then I'll seek out my next play pretty much as the duel goes on, because this deck is very situational. It's not a very strong deck, but it could be very powerful depending on how you use it. So that's pretty much the 3 plays I go for turn 1. Is either Dark Law, Beals, or Force Strike. The only reason I would also go for Force Strike turn 1 is just to mill from the deck, for that extra draw power, just getting through some of the cards in my deck, because this is a pretty big deck for the most part. It's 42 cards. Yeah, I've seen decks that's bigger within the game, like people run like 60 cards, people run 50 cards. 42 has always been a kind of iffy number for me. I always like to run my decks at 40, but from all the deck testing I've done with this build so far, 42 is a pretty nice number. Like, it's 42 cards is pretty good. So yeah, that's turn 1. So basically, when it comes to this deck, you mostly want to rely on your extra deck the most. Your extra deck is going to be the crux of the deck. That's why if you're dueling anything like Monarchs, if you're dueling anything that stuns your extra deck and doesn't allow you to pretty much play anything from your extra deck, you're going to be put in a very hard situation, because the whole deck revolves around your extra deck. That's why if you guys really want to, you can throw things like Twin Twister, if there's spell cards or trap cards that's preventing you from getting into your from your extra deck. You can also run cards like Mystical Space Typhoon or Galaxy Cyclone. Like, you can run cards like that just so you can get rid of back row that might potentially stun your deck. I don't run heavy traps in my deck personally, only because I don't feel like that's very, not necessarily useful. I don't want to say it's not useful, but for me it's not necessarily needed, only because, like I said, my extra deck does most of the back, like my extra deck is the backbone of the deck. The only time I would have or use most of my trap cards is in situations where I haven't gotten out the majority of my options from my extra deck. So that's the whole point of this deck, is very situational. You want to go about it in different ways depending on what type of opponent that you're facing. So let's go into some of the cards in the deck. Obviously, Allura Darkness is for draw power. Black Whirlwind, same type of mentality, draw power. Brilliant Fusion. Brilliant Fusion is, of course, only here because of Seraph Knight, and you can never go wrong with that extra normal summon, so you could just start up some of your plays. Like I said, it's not a one-for-one situation, so it's always going to have, you're going to have to adapt as a player to whatever situation's in front of you. But like, you can easily do something along the lines of, okay, throw out Black Whirlwind. If you have it, throw out Black Whirlwind, throw out Brilliant Fusion, get yourself Seraph Knight. Once you get yourself Seraph Knight, throw Tricky into the graveyard, throw, obviously, Garnet into the graveyard. Obviously, because of the effect, because of Brilliant Fusion sending Tricky to the graveyard, Tricky's effect is going to trigger. Special summon Tricky, Special summon Tricky, pay the 1,000 life points, and if anything, if you do have a normal summon monster, or if you haven't normal summoned, or you already done normal summon, doesn't matter. Seraph Knight gives you that extra normal summon anyway, and for the most part, all you have to bank on is just getting yourself like that level 4 monster, so you could just exceed. And that's when pretty much you can choose whatever exceed you go for. If you need an Ice Beast because your opponent has a lot of face-up monsters with a lot of crazy effects, go for Ice Beast. If you have a special summon monster at the time that you can get over, go for Silent Honor. If you have or need an extra level 4 monster so you can get out either an Ice Beast or you want to get out another monster, go for the Force Strike. It's pretty much that simple. Like, you want to treat every duel as not a one-for-one situation. Not every play is going to work for each opponent. You have to be able to adapt, and you have to be able to change your play style on the fly. And that's the real reason I really like this deck. only because it has no go-to or set-to plays. It's pretty much you have to adjust to your opponent, and then you have to go about treating your opponent for what he's using at the time. So that's the reason I really, really like this deck. So let's go through the cards. Hand Destruction. The one thing I could say about Hand Destruction, though, is just that Hand Destruction, there's a lot of dead cards in this deck. It's easy to get dead cards because, like, for instance, like, if you draw Garnet, pretty much now you have a dead Brilliant Fusion because you wouldn't be able to use Brilliant Fusion's effect. So with Hand Destruction, you could just pretty much get rid of cards that you just don't need at the time. Like, for my example, like, for me, it's pretty much just that if I do have cards that I either need or just need in my graveyard, obviously I'm just going to Hand Destruction. The cards that I would always prefer in my graveyard is like Zephyros, Trick Clown. If it's a dead card at the time, I'll throw away Brilliant Fusion. Some of the other Blackwing monsters, like I said, is going to be very touchy and hit-miss for the most part, but don't willy-nilly throw out Hand Destruction. If you don't need to use the card, do not use the card. Always save it for another play or another turn. If you want to, you can also use Hand Destruction as a bait card. Like, you can bait out like Mystical Space Typhoons, Twin Twisters. With this card, you can't bait out like a Galaxy Cyclone only because Galaxy Cyclone pops the card and you cannot activate the card in reaction to Galaxy Cyclone. So that's the only thing that sucks. And then you have Instant Fusion. So Instant Fusion, and I'll explain why I have the 2 Windas in my extra deck, but Instant Fusion is pretty much to get yourself either Winda, either Norden, and that's pretty much it. So when it comes to Norden, Norden is your other engine to accessing your graveyard. So depending on what cards you have in your graveyard, Norden will be able to pretty much resummon it, obviously negates its effects or whatever, and resummon it negates its effect, but that also gives you plays to either Synchro Summon or Exceed Summon. So that's the reason I really like Norden in this deck. Norden really keeps this deck very powerful and consistent during certain plays, depending on what's going on in the field at the time. And another good card that you can always get is Winda. So if you ever have or you need Beals at a particular time, you can just throw out Winda. You can play Gale or something like that. Yeah, you can throw out, or yeah, you can throw out Winda. Wait, what was the play that I go for? Okay, this is it. You can throw out Winda. Winda's effect is where you only could special summon once per turn. You could throw out Winda. You can get yourself, or normal summon, maybe like a Gale, or you can normal summon something along the lines of Blizzard and get yourself either a level 7 or a level 8. But you have to remember, though, because when it comes to Winda's effect, you have to keep in mind that Winda only allows you one special summon. So you have to keep that in mind, and you only can normal summon after you play Winda, right? So once you get all your plays out, once you get all your moves out and stuff, normal summon that Gale, normal summon that Blizzard. Don't activate Blizzard's effect because then you already misplayed. Normal summon one of them so you can either get out your level 7 or your level 8. For the most part, when you do that, you either want to go for Beals or you want to go for Raigeki or Chidori. Raigeki Chidori. Only because depending on the situation that's in front of you, popping a card could be more useful, or the attack points to get over a card could be more useful. So there's that. I think I already went over Mass Change. Shaddoll Fusion is just another way to get yourself out of Winda, only because if your opponent is special summoning like crazy, or he currently has a special summon monster on board, you can throw out Winda so that you could pretty much stun him. So when is your turn? I like doing it on my turn personally, never on my... Yeah, I love doing it on my turn. I think you only can do it on your turn. But I like doing it on my turn after I've gotten out most of my heavy hitters. Like, maybe I got a Chidori on board. Maybe I have a Beals on board because I'm lucky, or a Crystal Wing. What I like to do in those situations is throw out a Winda. Only because at that point, my opponent is put in this advantageous situation where now he has to kind of like, dang, like... What do I do? Do I get over the Winda? Could I get over the monsters and Winda? Like, what options are I'm giving at this situation? Like, at this point in time, like, it puts your opponent in this state of thinking where he has to either prioritize the Winda, and he has to go about going around the restriction that he's given with the one special summon. If he uses a lot of special summon monsters in his deck, as is, right? So, Soul Charge. Pretty much Soul Charge is like another Norden, getting into your graveyard, being able to just go for those plays, using the effects to counteract some of your opponent's board. So that's pretty much the mentality. Special summon stuns. You have Solemn Strike, I run 1. Solemn Warning, I run 1. And the only reason, I see a lot of people would argue me and say like, hey, it's probably better or more beneficial to run maybe like 2 Solemn Strikes, or maybe, I think you only could run 1. Yeah, you only could run 1 Warning. So some people would argue that 3 Solemn Strikes is the way, or 2 is the way. For me, like I said, I like, and I mostly do rely on my extra deck. So if there's any cards that I do need to get over, I'll throw out Winda. If there's a card or a special summon card that's giving me a hard time, I'll throw out Silent Honor. Or if there's an effect on board that prevents a special summon monster from getting attacked, then I'll just throw out Ice Beast or whatever. So that's pretty much the mentality I have when it comes to my back row, because I want my deck to be as fast as possible. So I don't run a lot of back row so that I'm just setting up and not really doing much. That's why I only run like, the most for me, I only run like 4, maybe 5 trap cards in my decks, and that's just a personal choice. Storming Mirror Force is just to counteract very problematic monsters. So when it comes to Storming Mirror Force, it pretty much returns all the cards that's in attack position back to the deck. So all of that goes back to the deck. So this card, for the most part, most players keep all their monsters in attack mode. So it does really kind of help. This card does really kind of help in certain situations where like your opponent is trying to go for game. He puts all his monsters in attack position and boom. Storming Mirror Force brings all of that back into the deck. And now I pretty much resetted my opponent's board. So now they have to kind of either work their way back to that original board, or now they have to worry about the board that I currently have established before playing Storming Mirror Force. So that's the reason I really like this card. Garnet is self-explanatory. Garnet is mostly for Seraph Knight. So Blizzard is a pretty basic Blackwing monster where he gets to special summon 1 level 4 or lower Blackwing monster from your graveyard. Pretty much another Norden. Getting access to that graveyard for plays. Blizzard, on top of him being an amazing level 4 monster in a Blackwing deck, he's very easy to access for the most part, because you can access Blizzard many ways. Through Paniki, you can get him through Black Whirlwind. If you draw into him, it's not that hard to draw into him, only because we have 3 in our deck, so we draw into him pretty often. So for the most part, I really do like this card, and he really does start up a lot of the rank 4 plays in the deck. So again, pretty self-explanatory there. Gale the Whirlwind, 3, definitely 3. There's certain situations where lowering your opponent life points, especially in this game, really does help. Only because you don't want to use Gale just for like synchro summoning. You also kind of want to use Gale's effect every opportunity you get. Like, don't just waste a Gale and not use this effect when you could just be lowering the attack of a monster just so you can either get over it or put yourself in better standings when you're going up against your opponent. Gladius, I honestly don't know about Gladius too much. This card is very hit miss. Like, honestly, I could put in another Kalut, or if you want to, you can put in another Kalut. But there has been duels where Gladius being on board, and because he takes like two attacks to be destroyed, he kind of isn't a terrible card. And also, you can special summon him if you have one other Blackwing monster on board. You can special summon him. But for the most part, he's really hit miss. Like, I mostly use Gladius is either bait for Hand Destruction, Shaddoll Fusion, or Allura Darkness. If I really don't need Gladius, I would just use one of those other spell cards just to get rid of him. So there's that. Like, Gladius, I'm still kind of iffy on him, but I leave him in the deck because he hasn't given me no reason to take him out. Like, I've never had a duel where it's just like, God damn it, Gladius, he's messing me up. You know, I've never had a duel that was ever like that. So I keep him in the deck just because of that. He's not a problem, but definitely you could replace him for something better. Harmonton the Dust. I see a lot of people either run 3, 1. Like, this card is very up and down the scales when it comes to a Blackwing deck. I personally like to run 2 because 2 is that comfortable number for me. Because there's situations where I either need to get rid of him, same like Gladius. I would use him as bait for Shaddoll Fusion, Allura Darkness, Hand Destruction, or even like Mass Change. I would use like Gladius or Harmonton for those cards. But sometimes, like, I would need Harmonton to be a card that I need to play, only because Harmonton is an easy access to Beals. Harmonton is an easy access to nothing if you have Blizzard on board. Harmonton is He's pretty much that one card that is very versatile in the deck that helps you access the majority of your extra deck. So, for example, right, let's say you have Blizzard on board, right? You bring back Boar, you bring back Chris, or whatever Blackwing you bring back, right? You bring one of those back, and you have Harmonton in your hand. You can special summon Harmonton, which is one of the best effects of him. You can special summon him, target something or someone like Blizzard. You can target Blizzard, and then Harmonton gets the effect where whatever Blackwing monster he targets, the level of the targeted Blackwing monster is added to Harmonton's level. So boom, you got yourself a level 6. Get yourself a nothing, go for some more plays. Or if you want to, if you have Gale on board, you can special summon Harmonton. You can target Gale. Harmonton will get the additional 3 levels, becoming a level 5. Boom, you got yourself Beals. On top of him already being a target for most of our fusion monsters like Shaddoll Fusion, Mass Change. So, and he's also a target for most of our draw power, Allure of Darkness, and Hand Destruction. That this card, I really do like this card in this deck. I feel like 3 is too much only because you don't want to be drawing him that much. So 2 is just that very, very comfortable number for me. 1, I don't like 1 only because you only are given the 1 option for him. But 2 is definitely that beautiful number. Kalut is a very controversial card in this deck because I don't use Kalut for what he's intended for, and that's for boosting the attack points of the Blackwing monster I currently have on board. Very useful, yes, but do I use it much? Not at all. Like, for the majority of duels I do have, I really don't use Kalut's effect at all. Like, I mostly just use Kalut for either, like, Black Whirlwind triggers, so I can either get a better, like, Blackwing monster from my deck to my hand. I also kind of have the same mentality for Kalut that I have for Harmonton and Gladius, where he's basically just spell card bait for, like, Shaddoll Fusion, Allure of Darkness, Hand Destruction, and Mass Change. So pretty much I don't use Kalut for what he's intended for, but he has so much versatility in the deck. Also, I'm not saying that there's no situation where getting an attack boost isn't useful, so there's that as well. Chris is one of those cards that you can throw out and he could pretty much take a effect hit, because if there's a spell card, trap card, or like monster effect that would destroy a card, Chris could take that 1 hit. So Chris is a very useful card. Also, Chris is access to a special summon. So if you have a Blackwing monster on board already, you have a Chris, you can special summon Chris, and boom, you can get yourself some of your plays, whether it's a level 6 play or a rank 4 play, or you're getting yourself like a rank, no, not rank, but level 7 synchro play. You can do all of that just with Chris. So next is Orochi. Orochi is a beautiful card in your deck depending on when you get him and what play you go for. Because when it comes to Orochi, I mostly use Orochi just to get myself Hawk Joe, only because like Orochi Hawk Joe combination with nothing is very powerful, because you can do something along the lines of, let's say you have nothing on board, you throw out Orochi, you synchro summon, get yourself Hawk Joe. Hawk Joe has the added effect of wherever Hawk Joe is special summoned, you can target one level 5 or higher Wing Beast monster from your graveyard, special summon it. And if you have cards like Chidori or Raikiri in your graveyard, boom, you don't have to get nothing out. You can easily get yourself back Chidori or Raikiri. That's the real reason I really like Orochi. Also, Orochi is a level 1, so he's able to get yourself like some decent plays with he's able to get yourself some good plays with combos with like Harmonton. You can get yourself good plays with like Bora. Like, I used to run Trishula in the deck, in the extra deck, but for the most part, I took out Trishula only because I don't always and consistently get 2 level 4s and Orochi, so I can get that level 9 play. So I kind of took out Trishula, but it's an option. Like, you can get out Trishula with like Bor on board, maybe Zephyros on board, throw out Orochi, boom, get Trishula, target some of the cards that's in the target some of the cards in your opponent's graveyard, target some of the cards in his hands and on board. Love that, because you put your opponent in that situation where they're just like, dang, he's targeting some of my plays. So I really do like Orochi. He's up there with Gale when it comes to just special summoning monsters. All right, now my favorite, I'll say this is like my second or third favorite card in this Blackwing deck, and that is Pinaki. Pinaki is that card that pretty much functions exactly like Norden. He functions somewhat like Black Whirlwind, where he's able to get you cards or put you in situations where you can reset whatever play that you need to get for your next turn, though. So whenever Panaki's on field and he's destroyed or used for a synchro summon, or pretty much to put it simple, whenever he leaves the board, you can activate his effect where you can add any Blackwing monster from your deck to your hand. So what I would usually do is I would reset my plays. So if I ever have like a Panaki on board and I can't special summon, I will still put him on board so I can bait my opponent to either destroy him and put him in my graveyard. So that way I can either target Blizzard so I can reset my play, get Panaki back and go for something else. Also, I'll either go for, let's say, Bora if I need those level 4 monsters so I can get out like either Ice Beast 101 or Force Strike. And another card I would usually target with Panaki would just be, yeah, I think that's mostly it. It'll be Blizzard, Bora, or Chris. Maybe sometime Hermonton, or maybe sometime Gale. But that's the beautiful thing about this card. Depending on the situation that you're in, you can pretty much target and get yourself any Blackwing to better suit you. To better suit you for next turn. That's the real reason I really like this card, because it gives you a lot of access to your whole deck or your Blackwing side of your deck. Also, it really does help when you have like Black Whirlwind on board. You have to be very cautious when you do this particular play, because then you're gonna potentially be eating damage. So for the most part, you can have Black Whirlwind on board, right? Then you can throw out Paniki. Once you throw out Paniki, you can, or Black Whirlwind's effect is going to trigger. You can draw a card from your deck that has, or you can get a Blackwing card from your deck that has lower attack points than Paniki, and then you'll just wait out your opponent's turn. If they destroy it, boom, you can get out another Blackwing monster. That's the real reason I like that combo with Black Whirlwind. So Paniki is a very versatile deck. I'll say it's kind of like Orochi, but Orochi is mostly used for synchro summonings. Paniki is mostly used for just getting cards from your deck. Same like Black Whirlwind. Okay, Steam. Steam the Cloak isn't a bad card, I want to say. Like, there's a lot of plays with Steam, but it's very easy to mess up using this card. Only because, like, there's been situations where I've used Steam the Cloak, and you could go for cards like Beals. He's pretty much like a Gale. You can target Steam with Hermonton, go for Beals. Plus, you'll also get a token, which is very dope. But Steam is one of those cards where it's just like, he's a very powerful card when used right and for the right play. But he could be very damaging at times too when you bring him back from the graveyard. Not saying you have to bring him back. It's not a mandatory effect or anything like that. It's optional. But if you do want to go for those synchro plays, be very wary and cautious of what cards you're tributing and what cards you're getting rid of to bring him back. Most of the times, I honestly don't use the token that he summons to bring him back. I would just use another monster. But you have to really deck manage. Like, this deck is all about managing your resources and knowing what you have at that current time. So for the most part, I like Steam in the deck, but it's very easy to misplay with this card. And Zephyros is probably my favorite level 4 monster in this deck, because I feel like he have that beautiful synergy with so many cards in this deck. Like, for example, right? Zephyros, the one card you don't want to use Zephyros for is Allure of Darkness. Do not banish. Please do not banish your Zephyros. Either use Zephyros for cards like Hand Destruction, cards like Shaddoll Fusion. You can use Zephyros for cards like Mass Change. Only because Zephyros being in your graveyard, he acts as a trick clown, which I love about him. He acts like a one-time trick clown. So when it comes to Zephyros, you can bring back a card, a face-up card on your field to special summon Zephyros. You take 400 points of damage, and you only can use that effect once per duel. But sometimes that once per duel, or using that effect once, will pretty much change the duel for you sometimes, because that could be the difference from you getting out like an Ice Beast to your opponent. That could be the difference of getting out like a Silent on Arc, a Force Stride. You also can go into some of your synchro plays. Like, it's a very powerful card. Or you can go into Dark Law. So that's the thing I really like about Zephyros. It's a very versatile card in the deck. Like, it's very useful. Also, it really plays well with a lot of the Blackwing cards and Synchro cards in the deck because it's a level 4. I can Paniki it, so I can get out Paniki's effect. Like, it's a very, very strong card in the deck. The only reason I run one and not multiple is because it's not a mandatory card that you need to have in your hand. One is good enough, especially for the effect. One is awesome enough. And this is the second questionable card in the deck because Ghost Ogre, for the most part, is not something crazy like an Ash Blossom, right? So Ghost Ogre, it's able to destroy a monster that activates its effect, but the effect still goes through. It doesn't negate the effect, it just destroys the monster or spell or trap card it destroys the monster or spell or trap card that triggers its effect. You could just destroy it, but the effect still goes. So just for pro tips when it comes to Ghost Ogre, if I were you, do not use Ghost Ogre on spell and trap cards. No sense. Unless it's a continuous spell, then you want to go for it. But if it's like a regular spell or trap card that got one usage, do not use Ghost Ogre for it. Only use Ghost Ogre for monsters. Only use it for monsters. Yes, the effect still goes, but you just got rid of a problematic monster in a sense. Because instead of having to deal with the card or the monster that this monster is either about a special summon or about a board wipe, you could just destroy that monster so you don't have to deal with it constantly for your future turns, right? Boom. Again, Trick Clown, self-explanatory. It's a target for Brilliant Fusion. Oh, I forgot to mention as well. So Ghost Ogre counts as a target for Brilliant Fusions as well. That's the only reason I keep it in the deck, but it's not necessarily needed. Like, it's very questionable. Because in that case, you can always just keep like Effect Veiler in the deck. Because right now, I could just take out Ghost Ogre and swap it out with Effect Veiler. Or I could take out Gladius and Ghost Ogre and put on like 2 Effect Veilers, or Effect Veiler and like a Blackluster Soldier. I can do either or. So, yeah. Anyway. So, Trick Clown. Trick Clown is that card that I love only because of its effect. So, Brilliant Fusion is the best combination that I have currently, right? Brilliant Fusion and Hand Destruction is the best combinations I have with Trick Clown when you draw him. Only because once Trick Clown is sent to the graveyard, doesn't matter how exactly he was sent, as long as he was sent to the graveyard, you have the opportunity to use his effect to bring him back, which I love. You can go for a lot of your rank 4 plays, except for one rank 4 play, and that's for Ice Beast, because Ice Beast, you need 2 level 4 Wing Beast monsters. You can't use Trick Clown for this card. You need 2 Wing Beast monsters. So whenever you have Trick Clown on board, for the most part, I always go for Force Strike, or I'll go for Silent on an Arc, but he also could be used for synchro plays. That's the really good thing about him. So you can use him for a synchro play if you need to. Alright, and last but not least, Shaddoll Dragon. Shaddoll Dragon is 100% for Shaddoll Fusion. The reason I run 2 is he's mostly just for bait now. Like, he's bait for Allure of Darkness, he's bait for Hand Destruction. He's on top of that, he's also a level 4, so I can target him with cards like Norden. I can target him with cards like Norden. I can target him with cards like Mass Change. So that's the great thing about Shaddoll Dragon. Plus, his effect as is pretty good. So if you have Shaddoll Dragon in your hand, you can always just set him, and you can return like a problematic card that your opponent has on board back to their hand, or back to the extra deck if it's a special summon monster. Also, if your opponent already has a special summon monster on board, and you have something along the lines of like Shaddoll Fusion in your hand, you can play Shaddoll Fusion, boom, you can throw out maybe like Shaddoll Dragon, you can throw Zephyros in the graveyard. You get Shaddoll Dragon's effect, where you can destroy a spell or trap card that's on field, and you can also throw in there the added effect of Zephyros, because now Zephyros is in your graveyard. You can bring a card that you have on field back into your hand, special summon Zephyros to go for a play if you are able to. So that's the real reason I really like Shaddoll Dragon at 2 in the deck. There are times where you do draw him when you really don't need him, but like I said, it's okay to Allure of Darkness him. It's okay to Hand Destruction him. It's okay to use him as bait for like Mass Change. You don't necessarily need this card in the majority of situations. He's mostly just 100% of a bait card. And yeah. So I feel like I went through Winda. Winda is pretty self-explanatory. He's meant, or she's meant, to pretty much stun your opponent's deck, or stun your opponent's special summons. Not the deck, but the special summons of it. Norden is that card to help you access your graveyard, also to get yourself some rank 4 plays and maybe some possible synchro plays. Seraph Knight is just for that additional normal summon, so you can combo into this with Black Whirlwind. Dark Law, same thing like Winda. All it is just a card to stun your opponent plays, and your opponent has to deal with this card right now. Like, that's the reason I really like Dark Law. Chidori, situational card, depending on what your opponent have on board. The extra attack that Chidori gains from each Blackwing monster you have in your graveyard could be useful. Again, Raikiri, situational card, depending on what your opponent has on board. Destroying the monsters and back row that your opponent has could be very useful. Beals, turn one game, my fault. Turn one play. Beals is that card you want to just have on board, similar to Dark Law, similar to Winda, so your opponent has to aggressively attack this card, whether it's banishing it, whether it's getting it off board, doesn't matter. Your opponent has to worry about Beals. And you pretty much are getting rid of some of your opponent's resources at that point. Nothing is pretty much like a Seraph Knight, is just for the additional normal summon. I used to run 2 Nothings, but I kind of found that was kind of useless to me, only because I have Seraph Knight. And there's a good balance between the two for the most part. So, I don't know. It's very hit and miss. Like, if you feel like you need 2 Nothings, I mean, definitely go for it. But because I have Seraph Knight, I feel like 1 Nothing is good enough, and then Seraph Knight will pick up any slack that card has. Hawk Joe is to accessing any destroyed monsters or Blackwing monsters that you have in your graveyard. So, boom. Hawk Joe is a very strong and powerful card of getting back any Blackwing monster or any Blackwing Synchro monster. Any Blackwing Synchro monster that you have. Crystal Wing, very, very situational card. I mostly go for Beals in this deck, but Crystal Wing is for very problematic special summon monsters. If you aren't able to get out something along the lines of maybe like a Silent Honor, a Winda to stun a play, and your opponent already has his established board, and something like Chidori isn't going to cut it, Crystal Wing is definitely going to be that card to help you counteract some of the plays that I feel like that's the perfect word to go about it. Like, most plays that your opponent goes for. Ice Beast is a beautiful card in this deck. Ice Beast is that card that pretty much says, until the end of your opponent's turn, when it's your turn, every face-up card that has an effect, you don't get your effect. I love this card because it puts you in so many perfect situations to not have to deal with your opponent's shenanigans. So that's the real reason I really like Ice Beast. So the next thing is 101, situational card, only because there's a lot of cards online anyway that pretty much, this card online is pretty much hit miss, because there's a lot of cards that pretty much says like card can't be targeted or unaffected by card effects. So Silent Honor Arc is another situational card. If you want to, you can always swap him out for like a Castell. You can swap him out for maybe a Cowboy if you're trying to go for game, or you can swap him out for the Utopic. Big Eye, it's funny. I wish I was recording this duel, but I was having some mock duels with a friend of mine's, and Big Eye was that one card that was saving me. I was dueling, I think he was using something along the lines of like Red Nova or like a Red Dragon Archfiend style deck, and the one thing that really helped me through those duels was Big Eye. Just snatch stealing a monster and keeping that monster for the duration of the whole duel is very, very useful. Because now I have Big Eye on board, which is already a 2600 monster, on top of whatever powerful opponent or whatever powerful card my opponent has at the time. Obviously, this card effect doesn't work on monsters that can't be affected by can't be targeted or affected by card effects, obviously. But cards like Beals or cards that's very problematic, snatch steal that thing. It doesn't work on cards like Crystal Wing, of course, but like I said, certain situations, Big Eye could be very useful. And also, you can swap out Big Eyes for Draco Sack, depending on the situation that you're going through. And I feel like Force Strike, I already talked about this card to death already. It's pretty much that situational card, that turn one card, to help you get through some of your deck. If you don't have cards in your hand like Black Whirlwind, if you don't have cards in your hand like Allure Darkness or Hand Destruction. So that's pretty much it. So yeah, guys, this is my Blackwing deck. Definitely try it out. Let me know what you guys think. I think it's a very strong and powerful deck in my opinion. This deck, for the most part, I didn't create it to be fast. So when you're using this deck, just keep in mind, this deck is not a fast deck. you're going to have to treat literally, that's the only reason I repeat that a lot in this video. You have to treat this deck very situationally, because for the most part, the hardest thing about this deck is recovery. So you don't want to just go balls in. You want to kind of pace yourself and go for a play by play. The point of this deck is to counteract your opponent's play and to put yourself in advantageous situations where you can overcome those plays. This deck is not the strongest deck in the game. It still loses to decks like Magic Specters. This deck loses to Cosmos, of course, and it loses to pretty fast decks that's able to get out their plays pretty consistently and fast and can recover fast. But for the most part, if I was to put this deck on a particular tier, this deck that I have right now, going up against what I've gone against online, I would definitely say this deck is either tier 2 or almost there. No. Tier 2 is a perfect way to put it. Like, this deck is definitely a tier 2 deck. Tier 0, this deck cannot go up against tier 0 in this game. Like, this game, tier 0 is 0. Like, you can't touch it. I can't touch it. I can pretty much prolong the duel, but for the most part, the only way I can win against tier 0 is if my opponent is new to the deck and don't really know how to really utilize it, like Cosmos. The only time I really beat most Cosmos players is because they didn't know how to use the deck. Or like Pepe players, the reason I beat most of them is because they didn't know how to use their own deck. So this deck is definitely a tier 2 deck. It's very good and consistent against a lot of decks. I'm not going to lie to you. Against a lot of decks, this deck is very, very strong and very, very powerful. So yeah. Let me know what you guys think. Comment down below if you plan on using it or if you already used it, how you like the deck so far. If there's any changes or things you want to change, then definitely let me know. The only thing I'm kind of contemplating changing is probably getting rid of Gladius and putting Blackluster Soldier in the deck. Just so my deck also have the added option of banishing cards. I might deck test that probably sometime within the week whenever I have free time to play the game. I'll probably stream it as well. But yeah. Also, if you guys want to see the deck in action, definitely follow me on Twitch. Twitch.tv/Carl66711. I do, for the most part, stream the majority of Yu-Gi-Oh! There. So if you're interested in just checking out how the deck plays and how the deck functions, definitely stop on by. But I'd like to thank you guys for watching. That's it for the video. You guys stay classy. Take it easy.